The most important moment of the Chinese Grand Prix didn't happen when the lights went out on race day. Nope, it actually hit about 30 minutes before the race even started. Fans were glued to the grid, watching the usual pre-race build-up, thinking everything looked normal. But inside the McLaren garage, something serious and highly technical was going down behind the scenes. Engineers were moving fast, tools out, tension in the air, because a hidden problem was creeping in right before the start. Oscar Piastri had already lined up on the grid. The car looked ready. The race strategy was locked in. Then suddenly, boom, the mechanics started pushing the car backward off the grid. Just moments later, the engine refused to fire up the power unit. Total shutdown. An electrical failure had knocked out the whole system, leaving the car completely silent. In one brutal moment, that quiet malfunction wiped McLaren right out of the race before it even got started. But that disaster opened the door wide for someone else to step into the spotlight. A 19-year-old driver suddenly had a clear path to shake up Formula One history. What followed didn't just surprise fans. It exposed a wild shift in the power balance for the 2026 season heading into the Shanghai weekend. Everyone expected the usual giants to control the story, but the script was about to flip in a big way. Ferrari had finally started to wake up, with Lewis Hamilton grabbing his first podium since moving to Maranello. Meanwhile, Mercedes had been quietly stacking momentum after showing strong pace in Melbourne. Still, nobody saw the spotlight swinging toward a teenager. Andrea Kimi Antonelli, just 19 years old, had already shocked the paddock by grabbing the youngest pole position in Formula One history during qualifying in Shanghai, and people in the paddock couldn't stop talking about it. That pole position alone was already historic, but turning that pole into an actual race win, with Ferrari right behind and ready to strike, was supposed to be almost impossible. The pressure was massive. The expectations were sky high. Yet while the cameras kept replaying Antonelli's incredible pole lap, something far more chaotic was unfolding behind the scenes in the paddock. Both McLarens were falling apart before the race even started. Lando Norris couldn't even get his car out of the garage because of an electrical control failure. At the same time, Oscar Piastri's car, already sitting on the grid, suddenly shut down from a completely different power unit electrical fault. Two separate failures, two different systems, but the same brutal outcome for the team. It was a shocking moment for the sport. For the first time since the infamous Indianapolis race in 2005, both McLarens failed to even start the race. By the time the lights finally went out, two of the grid's biggest contenders were already gone. Just like that. So now the real question starts buzzing around the paddock. Did McLaren just suffer one of the worst reliability disasters of the season? Or did their sudden disappearance accidentally open the door for a massive power shift in the 2026 championship battle? And before we go further, make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss any of our latest videos. Because what unfolded next in Shanghai completely flipped the way teams are now looking at the 2026 title fight. To understand why this race became legendary, we have to start with the technical meltdown that shook the grid before a single lap was even raced. McLaren arrived in Shanghai already under intense pressure. The team had shown glimpses of speed earlier in the season, but behind the scenes, engineers were sweating over something far scarier than lap times: electrical integration and system reliability. Modern Formula One power units aren't just engines, they're insanely complex energy machines. The internal combustion engine is only part of the story. The MGUK energy recovery system, battery deployment mapping, and electronic control modules work together to crank out nearly 350 kilowatts of electrical power. That's almost half of the car's total output. Which means one wrong electrical hiccup and the car doesn't just lose performance, it totally shuts down. And that's exactly what hit McLaren and Lando Norris. His car's failure came from the electrical control system tied to the power unit startup sequence. Engineers tried over and over to reboot it in the garage, but the software flat out refused to initialize the energy deployment module. Without it, the car simply can't leave the pit lane safely. Oscar Piastri's situation was even stranger. His car made it to the grid, systems live and running. The strategy simulation was clean, a one-stop race, planning to switch tyres between laps 17 and 23, a classic medium to hard strategy, the same Piastri had used to win Shanghai last year. But then, just minutes before the formation lap, telemetry screamed an electrical irregularity inside the power unit circuitry, throwing the entire plan into chaos. In modern Formula One, any serious electrical issue immediately triggers an automatic safety shutdown. That's why viewers suddenly saw mechanics physically wheeling Piastri's car off the grid. The electronics had locked down to prevent catastrophic damage to the power unit. Two separate electrical failures wiped both McLarens out before turn 1. And that's when the real domino effect started. The instant those two orange cars vanished, the entire strategic landscape of the race flipped upside down. Normally, McLaren would have been right there challenging Mercedes on pure race pace. Their exit traction and medium-speed corner speed could have put constant pressure on Antonelli throughout the race. But with both cars gone, the battle at the front morphed into a pure Mercedes versus Ferrari showdown, and Mercedes was ready for it. Look closely at the opening laps, and you'll spot something wild when Antonelli tried to attack Lewis Hamilton down the long back straight. Hamilton's Mercedes had a clear battery deployment edge. The car surged harder in the braking zone, letting him snatch the lead before turn 1. That wasn't just luck. That was pure ERS strategy. Mercedes engineers had programmed an aggressive early race energy deployment map to lock in track position right from the start. The moment Antonelli passed Hamilton, the whole race dynamic flipped. Once Mercedes had clean air, their aero stability and pace completely dominated the front. Check the telemetry during the race and it tells a jaw-dropping story. Antonelli started pulling away almost immediately. 1 second, then 3. Then suddenly more than 8 seconds clear of the field. In modern Formula One, that kind of gap usually means one of two things. Either the leader is pushing the car way beyond its limits, or the car has insane aerodynamic efficiency in clean air. And the Mercedes W17 clearly had both locked in. Meanwhile, Ferrari was fighting its own battle. Lewis Hamilton reported energy deployment problems during the race, meaning the Ferrari power unit was struggling to release stored electrical energy efficiently. That robbed him of straight-line speed and forced him into tense defensive battles with Charles Leclerc instead of chasing Antonelli. That internal Ferrari fight played right into Mercedes's hands. While Hamilton and Leclerc were battling wheel to wheel, Antonelli's lead kept climbing, 6 seconds, 8 seconds, at one point nearly 9 seconds ahead of George Russell. And here's where the real brilliance of Antonelli's drive shows itself. Even with a massive lead, he made a critical error with 3 laps remaining at the Shanghai hairpin. Antonelli locked up his front tyres and ran wide, costing roughly 2 seconds. For a 19-year-old chasing his first Formula One win, that moment could have caused panic. Most drivers would have spiraled, but Antonelli? He didn't flinch. Instead of panicking, Antonelli calmly reset his pace and brought the car home. And when he crossed the finish line, the full weight of that moment hit everyone like a lightning bolt. He became the second youngest race winner in Formula One history, the first Italian driver to win a Grand Prix in 20 years since Giancarlo Fisichella in 2006, and the driver who delivered Mercedes their second consecutive 1-2 finish. That last detail might actually be the biggest story, because while the world celebrated Antonelli's emotional victory, even his engineer Peter Bonington screaming over the radio, "Come on, my son!" a much bigger shakeup was happening in the championship. 3 of the sport's biggest contenders were already out of the race. Both McLarens didn't even start. Max Verstappen's Red Bull retired on lap 46 with an electrical dashboard failure. By the time the checkered flag fell, only 15 cars had finished the race. Reliability, something teams thought was mostly solved after pre-season testing, had suddenly become the most unpredictable factor of 2026. And that's where the political drama starts to heat up. Mercedes didn't just win, They dominated a chaotic Shanghai weekend while Red Bull struggled with tyre wear and electrical issues. McLaren collapsed before the race even began, and Ferrari wrestled with internal energy deployment problems. The championship wasn't just shaken, it was completely rewritten. But the story didn't end when Antonelli took the checkered flag. The fallout from Shanghai rippled through the paddock like a shockwave. Teams started frantically analyzing data, desperate to understand how a 19-year-old could seize such a commanding win while so many established stars crumbled. Every engineer, strategist and driver knew one thing: nothing in 2026 could be taken for granted anymore. Mercedes suddenly looked untouchable, but their dominance came with a warning. The W17 had clear energy efficiency and aero performance, but the real question now was whether they could maintain it under pressure when reliability issues started creeping into the Red Bulls and Ferraris. Meanwhile, Red Bull looked vulnerable for the first time in years, Max Verstappen's electrical failure proving that even champions aren't invincible. And McLaren? The double DNF before the first corner exposed cracks that no one could ignore. A team with speed and talent was suddenly on the back foot, forced into urgent redesigns and system checks to prevent another disaster. Every move in the next race would be under a microscope. One mistake could cost the championship entirely. Shanghai didn't just crown a new young star, it rewrote the power map for 2026. Reliability, strategy and energy deployment had suddenly become the real weapons of the season, and any team that underestimated them risked being left behind. Formula One had entered a new era, and the balance of power was shifting faster than anyone expected. Mercedes quietly pulled off the cleanest race of the weekend. Perfect pole, flawless race pace, spot-on strategy, and most importantly, zero reliability issues. In a season where the new generation of hybrid systems is pushing electrical power delivery to the absolute limit, that kind of stability could be the deadliest weapon on the grid. Shanghai proved one thing loud and clear: speed alone isn't enough anymore. The 2026 championship might not just come down to who's fastest, it could come down to which team keeps their electronics alive under pressure. And here's the question nobody wants to ask yet. If Mercedes already has the most reliable electrical platform on the grid, and a 19-year-old phenom like Antonelli can win under insane pressure, could this Chinese Grand Prix quietly mark the moment the championship started tipping in Brackley's favour? Or was it just one chaotic race that made Mercedes' advantage look bigger than it really is? Drop your take in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our deep dive F1 investigations, because in 2026, every race is starting to feel like a game changer.